A Dark Piece by Dana Lee, Chapter 9. If Miss McBride begrudged Jenny in her condition, she did not show it. She did not dote on her as Lee did, though. An unwed mother was unheard of in town, even with the colored people. If people were talking, however, as Lee was certain they must be, it was kept on the down low. Perhaps they felt as alone and frightened as she. As she waxed with the moon, she kept herself hidden indoors. One late August morning, Ernest paid them a surprise visit. He had gotten a letter from Glenn, who was still camped in Virginia and regretted missing his only brother's funeral. He was afraid that God would hold this against him. He had tried to make it back, but with the loss of much of his regiment and the hostility of the rebels, there was no time. He also saw how the army treated the civilians, and he was not proud of it. Homes were occupied, looted, and burned. Women were abused. Some of the men from New York were the worst. Prisons had given rapists and murderers get-out-of-jail passes if they enlisted in the army. With the rebels moving north, trying to breach Washington and Lincoln himself, he worried about the fate of his family. He asked Ernest to save them from these lurid details, but also asked if he'd watch over them for him while he was gone. It would put his mind at ease. "Why, Ernest, hello, won't you come in?" "Thank you. Hello, Lee. You are more beautiful with each passing day." She took his hat but did not smile. She wasn't taken with his country charm. "Where is Miss McBride when company shows?" The woman had the hospitality of a spider, I swear. "Sit down. I'll fix us some tea. I'll see if I can find Jenny for us, too. She'll be so happy to see you." Her hair was pulled back. Jenny had fixed it for her in an impossible series of braids, so she had to sleep on her side. She wore her plain brown dress, but had a white silk scarf held around her throat with a cameo that had been her mother's. For years she thought the cameo held two little angels, fat cherubim. "Only this morning," Jenny said. "What a lovely brooch. What sweet little lovers." "They're angels," Lee corrected. "No, they aren't. See?" She fingered the cameo. "One's a boy, one's a girl. See? No wings. He's holding on to her, supporting her. They're lovers." Lee took it off and inspected it closely. "Why, you're right. Why have I never noticed it before? I must have worn this pin 100 times." Jenny laughed. "Because you're like that? Too busy consorting with the angels to see what's right under your nose." "Lee," Ernest called her back to earth. "Can I talk to you alone for a minute first?" He got up from the chair. As big as he was, he seemed feeble and weak with his efforts towards her. "No, Ernest, I don't think that's such a good idea." He stammered for an excuse and escape. He did not understand her. He did not understand women. He was much better with sheep and pigs. "I get a letter from your brother." "Oh? What is it? Is he all right?" "He's fine. He asked me to stop by, check on you every once in a while, make sure everything is all right." "It's very kind of you, but, Lee, I took it as a blessing, which I know it is." He grasped her hand and would not let her pull away, got down on his knee and reached in his pocket. This isn't happening, she thought. This can't be happening. This is not the way it's supposed to be. She was embarrassed for him, sorry he wasn't sharp enough to know. "Lee, I'll do it right this time. I got you a ring. Lee, will you marry me?" He tried to slip the ring on her finger, but she curled it under defiantly. "Oh, get up, Ernest," she whispered, trying to make light of it, not wanting to hurt his feelings, break his heart, for although she hadn't known one herself, she knew a broken heart was a hard thing to live with. "Don't be silly." She pulled him up. "Get up already before someone sees you." He sank back in the chair, defeated. "You wait right here. I'll get us some tea, and you tell me all about Glenn's letter. Why haven't you brought it with you?" While she was putting the pot on the stove and Ernest was contemplating slinking out the back door, Jenny came down the front stairs in her dressing gown and slippers. When he got up from the chair, he startled her with his presence. She was ashamed with her obvious state. He was also surprised, but he hadn't known. Because he hadn't known. "Why, Ernest, I didn't know you were here." "Hello, Jenny, how are you?" Ernest visited frequently afterwards, and they all shared letters and news clippings. His brothers were in Maryland, Frederick, as the rebels had reached the north. As the summer bled to fall, death scratched his mark once again. Ernest's elder brother Elijah was killed in Sharpsburg, Maryland, shot through the head in a field of wheat. Ernest had to go and recover the body himself, which had been marked and buried in a shallow grave. "I'm glad it was in a wheat field, really his favorite place. He was never one for livestock," he told Lee. Lee recalled Elijah Wood, 21, tall, strapping, good looks. He was single, a quiet man. Pa always said that Elijah was the dreamer in the family. He worried that he wouldn't make much of himself. Did he, Lee? What do you think? "Go get your brother, Ernest. Bring him home. Plant him in the wheat field. There will be time enough to ponder these things later. I think he's a hero. That's what I think. I think they all are heroes. So does Jenny." "How far along is she?" "It's Finn's baby." "I know. She's due in December. An awful month to have a baby. Fritz Derhofer has offered to travel to Maryland with me. He has a fine wagon to bring Elijah home in." "How's your mother doing?" "Not good, I'm afraid. She wasn't doing well before the news. I wish I didn't have to leave her. Sarah's sick." "How long will you be gone?" "If all goes well, we hope to get back within the week. I'm afraid we will not have much of a funeral, just a prayer service. I'll bury him with Father." Lee spent the rest of the afternoon with Mrs. Olson. Both women had been receiving letters from Willie. His mother read the latest aloud to her. August 27th, 1862. "Dear Mother and Father, the boys and I are playing cards today. I wish I could say the island has become a pretty place. It would be pretty, like one of Glenn's fairy islands he sings about. It's deceptive. I miss Glenn. His fiddle would be welcomed here. The boys take to singing about their mothers and sweethearts as night falls, when the mosquitoes do their worst. The songs keep them going, the boys that is, but probably the mosquitoes too. The river looks nice now, green, as it captures the reflection of the trees on the little islands, gold and sparkling when the sun shies away. Nothing much is new here. The same, little food, much fever and pneumonia, as the night is damp. I'm not looking forward to winter, I can tell you. Many boys arrive here so battered as to not make it through the first night. The island is now crowded and dirty. I feel as if amongst a colony of river rats. Please write back. Your affectionate son, Willie. Oh, Lee, I wish you would write him more often. I have a gift for you." She handed her a pink and white striped box tied with a pink ribbon. Inside was fine white paper trimmed in tea roses and pink envelopes to match. There was also a roll of 3-cent stamps. "Thank you, Mrs. Olson. You are too good to me." She picked up the bunch of envelopes and breathed them in. "They're scented. Don't they smell nice? Like roses." "Yes, it makes him so happy to hear anything at all from you, Lee. I wish he had something to live for. Why don't you copy down the music of one of Glenn's songs, a hopeful one, and send it down to him? I'm sure he'd like that." "What a good idea. You're so clever." Mrs. Olson wore a lovely rose-colored dress with full skirt that fell to the floor. It was gathered round her little white shoulders in a cloud of cream lace. Her hair was pulled up, and little gold curls sprung about her delicate face. There were creases in her brow that Lee had not noticed before. "Well, let him think you thought of it. Willie has every reason to live, Mrs. Olson, believe me. You are sweet, but you don't seem to know that love is the only reason to live, the only thing really worth living for. He will come home to much love. Lee, my sister has invited me to stay with her in New York this Christmas. Would you like to come along with me?" "Oh, I'd love it more than you could know, and thank you for asking, but Jenny will be due to deliver the baby then. I couldn't leave her like that." "No, I don't suppose you could. You've been better than a sister to her. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll go shopping in New York for the baby. I hope it's born before Christmas. Has she talked to her parents? No, Jenny has an older sister who found herself in the family way to a drifter. The sister Beatrix swore she was attacked, but her parents didn't believe her, especially her father. She was sent to live in Pittsburgh with her great aunt. Jenny never hears from her, although she has since written. I see. I'm sure they must know by now. I don't know. Jenny keeps herself hidden in the house. Ernest didn't know. Miss McBride would never tell. What's going on with that Ernest boy anyways? Lee blushed. I couldn't tell you. It's my idea that he should marry Jenny. He visits with us often enough. You know, he has only just left today to recover his brother in Maryland. Did you know him? Elijah? We had never spoken to each other, except to say hello or how do you do. He was such a fine-looking man. He seemed very polite, if not withdrawn. Do you suppose Jenny could grow to love him? Well, I don't see why not. He is very nice and quite good-looking. He has a big farm with horses, sheep, and pigs. Jenny is a farmer's daughter. Besides, he needs a wife. His mother and sister are in ailing health. His brothers are not around to help him. Jenny is his sister, Sarah's only friend, believe me, and they have known one another all their lives. You are naive, my darling. Whether you've known each other 10 minutes or a decade makes no difference to love. Of course I'm naive. I live here, but I read the newspaper. It's enough to make me thankful that Willie is trapped on that island. So you do worry about him. Chapter 10. Ernest and Fritz arrived in Sharpsburg 2 days later. Nothing could prepare them for what lay waiting in wait for them there. The woods, the farms, were littered with corpses, mangled, contorted in throes of hideous pain and death. They lay, their hollowed eyes eaten out with maggots. Their open mouths were crying to the sun, bleeding to put out its light and let them rest in cover of darkness. The town itself was smaller than Gettysburg, but held several fine two-story homes with tin roofs. The houses were riddled with bullet holes. The men checked the address of the house where Elijah's commander's clerk was staying and entered the stately abode. What lay await inside the house was worse than the macabre sight of the bloodied fields. Screams, tortured cries of agony and defeat assaulted their ears. Ernest likened it to the sounds of pig to the slaughter. The smell was ghastly, and both farmers covered their noses. A thin boy in blue uniform, younger than Elijah, greeted them in the foyer. "Can I help you? Have you come to claim a body?" "Yes, sir. I'm Ernest Wood, and I've come to claim the body of my brother, Private Elijah Wood, 12th Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry. I was notified that he had been shot down in a wheat field." "Yes, let me see here." He had a pigeonholed desk, and he opened a bottom drawer crammed with files. "Wood, Wagner, Walcott. Yes, here it is. Your brother has been buried, sir. A friend of his, Anton Jeffers, from Delaware, buried him himself. See here." He showed them a small, hand-drawn map where an X marked the grave. "There is a wooden marker inscribed with his name. You will find it at the edge of the woods, not far from the little white church. Do you wish to have his body exhumed, then?" "Yes. Is it far from here?" "Not far at all. I'll have Private Johnson escort you there. Do you have shovels?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Then, gentlemen, I'm afraid I can't prepare you for what you will find there. Most of the men have not even been buried yet. He will not be in a box." "Is there any place in town that we might rest before going back home, then?" The clerk cleared his throat. A cacophony of screams fell upon them from the second floor. "There's no place here, sir. The houses are all occupied with dying men. You may be able to find a boarding house in Boonesboro, but at this point I doubt it. Families have been arriving from all over to claim their dead." "Looks like we camp out the night then, Fritz." "I don't mind that none, boy. Let's get on with it." Johnson was a small man with frail shoulders. His blue uniform was dirty and torn. His hands were filthy with obvious cuts and scabs. "I've been reading a lot about the battle in the paper," said Fritz. "Why do they call it Antietam?" he asked Johnson. That's the old Indian name for the place. It means Bloody Creek. Well, I'll be damned, said Fritz. We're from Gettysburg, said Ernest. Never heard of it. It's a little town in Pennsylvania. The Indians were said to have cursed it before they were driven away. He lies here. I have to get back to headquarters. There'll be another lost family waiting for me. Thank you, said Ernest, and dug his shovel into the ground. Fritz was still and speechless. He didn't like this business, digging up the dead. He stared off in the distance to the little white shack they had passed, or what was left of it. It seemed more the spirit of a shack, for it was riddled with holes and gashes. Did he say it was a church? He wondered to himself. The grounds surrounding the church were stained red. He could see that even from this distance. The trees were covered in black, unholy wounds. Turkey buzzards and flies swarmed surrounding the place. Ernest had a plain pine box on the wagon, covered in tarp. His mother had laid a quilt for their brother inside. She and Sarah had worked feverishly on it as soon as they got the news. They had only dug a few feet when a hand was uncovered. Both men stared in horror as it seemed to be waving up at them. The smell of death nearly knocked them down and caused Fritz's empty stomach to retch. If you need to sit down, Mr. Derhofer, I can finish. We buried my own boy, but it wasn't like this. He hasn't been cared for, son. He will not keep. The bugs have overtaken him. Your mother cannot see him like this. We have to get him in the ground as soon as we get home. There'll be no time for stopping. One of us can rest while the other gets hold of the reins. It's hard to believe we've come to this. We all come to this. That's not what I mean. It's hard to believe that men can do this to each other. That is what they've always done to each other. This is what they've always done to each other. The most horrible beasts are men. The best of them are often the worst. How'd an old farmer like you become such the philosopher? Life is philosophy. Death makes you ponder it. I can tell you, sir, there's a part of me that feels ashamed with myself for not enlisting with my brothers. Until today, I thought that was my better half. Yeah, and now you think differently, huh? Ernest shrugged his shoulders and nodded his head. Do you think Mr. Lincoln is a good man, sir? He's the best. That's why he's a giant. He won't last long. The best ones never do. McClellan is a good one, too, but he's no general. That's why Lincoln gave him the boot. Maybe we'll start winning this war now, ending it. Chapter 11. Lee had an ongoing correspondence with Willie, who had nothing but time on his side. November 10th, 1862. Dear Lee, there's talk of them trading us for rebel POWs after Christmas, for the Confederacy is getting low on recruits. I find that very little seems to matter these days at all. I do worry some about the onset of winter. It is getting cold fast and these boys are so sick and weak. Billy, you remember, I told you about him in my last letter. The boy from Fredonia died last night. He died in his sleep. He had a fever. Lots of boys get it, typhoid. It's the pneumonia we have to look forward to. They have put us here to die, it seems. That's why I've decided to finally tell you. I love you, Lee. I know you've always known it, but I've never said it. I wanted to. I see your sweet smile in the back of my mind all the time. It keeps me going. That's what matters. Love from Willie. Lee's face flushed, and she hid the letter like a guilty secret. She did not love Willie. So why the morbid excitement, she wondered. Jenny spent most of these days in bed now. Even Miss McBrien brought her breakfast in bed on a tray. Winter was upon them, and the windows were frosted when a knock came at the front door. It was Ernest. Miss McBrien let him in, and they talked about his family some before Lee came in the room. Oh, Ernest, I didn't know you were here. Hello, Lee. He stared at his boots. Excuse me, Miss McBrien. May I speak with Lee alone for a moment? The housekeeper shot Lee with a smug look and left the room. Heavy velvet drapes separated the parlor from the foyer, and much to Lee's dismay, he closed them. Don't be scared, Lee. I'm not afraid. It's just, Lee, did you tell anybody about my proposal? Don't be silly. You didn't? Of course not. You're a very strange girl, Lee. And a very nice one at that. I wish I could be half as nice as you are. You are twice as nice as I'll ever be. Lee, what you said about Jenny before, well, I've been thinking about it. I think it's the right thing to do. We've been spending more and more time together these days. Have you? Yes, I know it may seem fickle of me to you because I don't suppose you'll understand, but I believe we need each other. No, remember, this was my idea, and I agree with you completely. Oh, I'm so happy for you. We can have a winter wedding outside. We'll make Jenny a big coat and a muff so not to see. So you think she'll have me? Why the hell wouldn't she? And she did. They were married in the churchyard a few days later. Miss McBride was fuming. You'd never catch a priest who would marry them. Michael was as moved as if it had been his own daughter. He was a bit disappointed now, since now his grandchild would not be living with him, but Jenny promised to stay until after the holidays and the child was born. She also promised to bring the child for supper every Sunday. I tell you, Jenny, this must be the strangest bridal bed ever, Lee laughed as she pulled the curtains round the bed. Are you warm enough? Yes, Mum, they giggled. Ernest and I have already discussed this, not till after the baby is born, you understand. Of course, don't be vulgar. Lee, you know I'll never love him like I loved your brother. Oh, Jenny, if you keep looking to the past, there can be no future. Chapter 12. The fireplaces were blazing, and Miss McBride was in the kitchen making pudding for the holidays. Michael brought a small Douglas fir in the parlor. Lee had strung it with popcorn and was busy crafting ornaments from remnants. A small rapping was heard from outside the frozen door. It was Mrs. Olson leaving for New York today. I wanted to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I won't be coming back until the New Year, so I come bearing gifts. This one is for you, Lee. Oh, thank you. Wait, right here. Sit down. Oh, I haven't got the time. I have to be at the station. I'm afraid I took too long getting ready. I'll be just a second. She came running back at her with a box of brightly wrapped homemade candy tied with a bow and a hug. Thank you, my darling. I'll open it on the train as a surprise. Don't open yours till Christmas. Oh, I won't. Have a safe trip. Merry Christmas. Goodbye. Michael joined them for lunch in the dining room, a newspaper in his hand. Where'd your brother say he was last? Do you remember? Fredericksburg. That's not good. What's the matter, Daddy? Thousands upon thousands of our boys were shot down there yesterday. Lee felt a lump lodge in her throat. They busied themselves for the holidays, but were ever anxious for any news. They hadn't read his name on the rosters. They tore through the papers like children. Once they got the endless list of names, they were afraid to look. Lee felt a burning correlation between this and her heart. The house was trimmed with wreaths and holly. Red-tapered candles were set upon the table in a centerpiece with pine cones and spruce. Carolers were singing from the street, a version of Greensleeves. Oh, it is time, Jenny called from the bedroom. Miss McBride was ready for it, and on December the 23rd, their little angel was born. They named her Elizabeth Hope. All were proud. Miss McBride wrapped her in a lovely white receiving blanket that she had made herself as a Christmas gift for Jenny. Jenny wept tears of joy, but was hearty, if not more than a bit tired and sore. Lee was sickened at the sight and passed out and hit the floor in faint when she saw the crown of little Elizabeth emerge. Stupid girl, said Miss McBride. Jenny couldn't agree with her enough, however. She would have liked to faint, too. All of that blood Lee recalled to herself as Michael passed her a plate of plum pudding. She was disgusted by it, as she was disgusted by the thought of her own rare cycle. It sickened her. She would not be wanting any babies of her own. Of this she was sure. On Christmas Eve they were having eggnog after prayers when a knock came at the door. Sweet Jesus, it's a Christmas miracle. There was Glenn standing at the front door in one piece, or that's what they believed as they enveloped him in a group hug of sheer joy, the kind you only feel when God has answered your prayers. They ushered him in with warmth and tears. He felt his heart melt for a moment, and he wept like a baby. Is that a baby I hear? He pricked his ears up like a terrier. Or am I deaf from artillery fire? Laughter on Christmas Eve sang through the halls of the house, and it seemed like old times for a moment. Come, let me show you first, Lee nodded to Jenny. They headed up to Lee's room, where Elizabeth slept in Lee's old bassinet. Jenny picked her up and handed her to him. I'd like you to meet your niece, Elizabeth Hope. Merry Christmas, Uncle Glenn. Glenn seemed confused. They hadn't told him about the pregnancy. They had left that entirely up to Jenny. She's Finn's. Ernest and I were married a couple of weeks before she was born. We both loved your brother very much. Neither of us was at all sure about it at first. I had planned on staying here, but it seemed like the right thing to do. You must be starved, little brother. Let's go down and fix you a Christmas feast. There was turkey, ham, mashed potatoes with whipped butter and chives, Christmas pudding, cookies, and raspberry tarts. We've been so anxious for any news about you after reading about Fredericksburg, his sister said. And she poured him a glass of elderberry wine. He downed it. He had the same vacated look to his eyes as Michael. Lee thought she remembered his eyes as hazel, but now they looked gray as the world, and bleak. She touched his hand. We're so happy you're home. I can't believe it myself. There were so many dead at Fredericksburg, thousands upon thousands. I've seen things you're never supposed to see. St. Mary's Heights, that's what they called it. They ought to change the name out of respect, you'd think. The earth there seems as if a temple sculpted out of itself. I wonder if the Indians didn't have something to do with that. Like Devil's Den, remember how we played there, and it seemed as if someone collected those rocks with a purpose in mind. Daddy said the giants must have done it. Oh, play us a song, son. He took the fiddle and lapsed into God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen. Not as much merry as it was sad. The fairy fiddle whined out a rhapsody of tragedy and loss. I want to see it. Can we go now? He asked, as he took the fiddle from his fuzzy chin. They all looked at him as if woken from a dream that had started off happy but left them wondering in confusion. I want to see where you've put him. We put him with your mother, Michael said. Do not disturb them now, said Miss McBride. I'll take you first thing in the morning after you've washed and rested. He nodded his head of long hair in submission and sat back down in the dining room chair. He looked round the room, so warm and welcoming. His sister had scalloped green garlands of pine wound all about the chair rail. There were ribbons of red lapsing every foot or so. He was back to the mountains of corpses laying dead upon fallen needles of pine and leaves, their sleeping faces marred with ribbons of blood. I think I'd like to go to bed now. Of course you would. They all tucked in for a busy Christmas day.